Mom, let me say this again. That isn't yours, it's mine. I bought it myself. My mother-in-law looked right through me and said, "Everything in my son's house belongs to me." My husband didn't stop her. Instead, he said, "Come on, they're just a few worthless things." I stayed silent until I made them understand in a different way. Welcome back to Revenge Mode. If you enjoy seeing entitled people get exactly what they deserve, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Now let's get into today's story. I am Alicia, a 30-year-old sales director. I worked relentlessly in my 20s to buy my own house in a beautiful suburb of Tampa, Florida. When I married my husband Harrison, who is 32, I made sure we signed an ironclad prenuptial agreement. My house, my assets, my rules. But because I loved him, I made one fatal mistake. I gave Harrison a spare key to my property. I thought it was a symbol of trust. I didn't realize I was handing over an all-access pass to a woman who believed my hard-earned life was her personal shopping mall. The irony is his family wasn't all bad. My father-in-law Douglas is a traditional strict man who values honor and absolutely despises liars. He built his reputation on integrity. If Douglas knew what his wife and son were scheming right under his nose using that very spare key to invade my privacy and steal a priceless black diamond necklace from my safe, he would have disowned them himself. And eventually, I gave him a front-row seat to their betrayal. It all started a few months after Harrison and I moved into our new home. I woke up early on a Tuesday morning to prepare for a crucial board meeting. I walked into my master bathroom and immediately noticed something was wrong. My expensive foundation bottle sat awkwardly on the edge of the counter. It felt noticeably lighter. I brushed it off as my own clumsiness. I walked down the hall to the kitchen to grab breakfast. A half-drunk mug of coffee sat abandoned on the island. The rim had a faint smear of pink lipstick. Harrison drank his coffee black, and I had not even turned the machine on yet. I checked the guest bathroom next. A damp bath towel lay crumpled on the floor. My pulse began to quicken. Someone else had been inside my house. I asked Harrison about the mess, but he just shrugged and mumbled about being half asleep. I lacked the time to interrogate him because the clock was relentlessly ticking. I grabbed my briefcase and hurried into the garage. I pressed the wall button to open the door and froze. The space where my SUV usually sat was entirely empty. A cold wave of panic hit my chest. I frantically dug through my purse for my car keys. They were right there in my hand. I glanced at the wall hook near the door. The spare key ring was missing. I pulled out my phone and dialed Harrison. The call went straight to voicemail. My heart pounded against my ribs. I had a massive presentation in 45 minutes. With no other option, I ordered a premium rideshare. The morning surge pricing was astronomical, but I had to reach the office. I sat in the back of the stranger's car, gripping my briefcase. My mind raced through a dozen scenarios. None of them made sense until I remembered the spare key I had foolishly entrusted to my husband. The workday felt endless. I finally returned home late in the afternoon. My SUV was parked sideways in the driveway. The driver's seat was pushed all the way forward, and the radio was blasting a station I never listened to. I marched up the front steps and pushed the door open. A suffocating cloud of floral scent hit my face instantly. It was my signature perfume. A bottle that cost me $300. I walked into the living room and stopped dead in my tracks. My mother-in-law, Teresa, was lounging comfortably on my sofa. My Chanel sunglasses were pushed back into her hair. She held a small mirror and was casually applying my exclusive lipstick. She did not even flinch when I walked in. I demanded to know what she was doing inside my house and why she had taken my vehicle. Teresa slowly lowered the mirror. She looked at me with absolute entitlement. She calmly explained that she needed to go to the hair salon and refused to pay for a taxi. She insisted that since her son lived here, she had every right to drop by whenever she pleased. She claimed the makeup was just sitting there going to waste. The front door clicked open before I could unleash my fury. Harrison walked in carrying his gym bag. I immediately turned to him and demanded he take the spare key away from her right this second. Harrison looked at me and then looked at his mother. He let out a long sigh and grabbed my arm. He pulled me into the kitchen away from Teresa. I expected an apology. I expected him to be outraged that his mother had invaded my personal space. Instead, he rolled his eyes and crossed his arms. He told me I was overreacting. He kept his voice low, but his words were laced with condescension. He said his mother just borrowed some makeup and needed a quick ride to her appointment. He looked me dead in the eye and asked why I was making a huge deal out of nothing. He pointed out that I made plenty of money, so I should not be crying over a few drops of gas. He told me to stop acting selfish. I stood there listening to the man I married defend a blatant invasion of my property. 3 weeks later, my company sent me to Orlando for a real estate convention. I stood in the crowded convention hall during a networking break when my phone buzzed in my pocket. A motion detection alert flashed across the screen. It came from my living room security camera. I tapped the notification and watched the live feed. Teresa strutted through my front door. 3 women followed right behind her. They carried grocery bags and completely ignored the rule about taking shoes off on the hardwood floor. I watched in absolute disbelief as Teresa marched straight to my custom wine rack. She reached for a bottle I had saved for a major career milestone. It was an extremely rare vintage wine. I had spent months tracking it down at auctions. Teresa grabbed the corkscrew. She popped the cork on a bottle she could not even pronounce and poured 4 glasses. They clinked their glasses together and laughed. The camera feed switched as the women moved down the hallway. They entered my master bedroom. My blood boiled. Teresa opened the doors to my walk-in closet like she was hosting a museum tour. She pulled my limited edition designer handbag off the top shelf. She passed it around for her friends to inspect. One of the women asked how a young wife could afford such extreme luxury. Teresa laughed aloud. She tossed the handbag back onto the shelf. She looked at her friends and delivered a sentence that made my stomach drop. "The money my daughter-in-law makes is for my family too," she boasted. "She is just holding on to these things for now. Eventually, every single thing in this house belongs to Harrison." I gripped my phone tight enough to crack the screen. I stormed out of the convention center and dialed Harrison immediately. He answered after the 4th ring with heavy background noise. I demanded he leave work right this second, drive back to our house and kick his mother out of my bedroom. I expected him to panic. I expected him to finally realize she had crossed a massive line. Instead, he let out an annoyed groan. He told me to calm down and stop acting crazy. I told him she was drinking my vintage wine and treating my closet like a thrift store. Harrison did not care. "If Mom wants to invite her friends over, just let her," he snapped. "It is just a few friends having a drink. That is my house too, you know." The line went dead. He hung up on me. I stared at the disconnected call screen. The betrayal felt like a physical blow to the chest. Harrison had just handed his mother a blank check to my life. I looked back at the security feed. The 4 women were now sitting on my bed. They were spilling drops of red wine on my white duvet cover. Teresa was trying on my jackets. She paraded around the room modeling my clothes. Every time she grabbed a new item, she asserted her dominance over my property. Her friends cheered her on, validating her twisted sense of entitlement. One of the women even picked up my jewelry box and started inspecting the clasps. They treated my sanctuary like a free playground completely devoid of any basic human decency. I took a screenshot of the footage to document the exact moment they violated my space. The rage inside me shifted into a cold and calculated focus. I did not call Harrison back. Arguing with a man who willingly enabled this behavior was a complete waste of breath. He had chosen his side. He made it perfectly clear that my boundaries meant absolutely nothing to him. I closed the security application and walked back into the convention hall. I needed to finish this business trip. I needed to secure my commission and close the deals I came here for. I refused to let his toxic family ruin my professional drive. I spent the rest of the afternoon outlining my exact next steps while pretending to listen to keynote speakers. I would not scream. I would not cry. I would execute a plan to sever her access entirely and protect my assets. The moment I returned to Tampa, I didn't even drop my bags before calling a locksmith. I stood in the foyer staring at the front door, knowing the physical lock was a massive vulnerability. The technician arrived within 20 minutes. I stood over him and ordered the complete removal of every mechanical deadbolt on the property. He stripped the old brass fixtures and installed heavy-duty military-grade smart locks with biometric fingerprint scanners and digital keypads. The physical spare key Harrison had so generously handed to Teresa was now officially a useless piece of scrap metal. I synced the master control system exclusively to my personal smartphone. I claimed the sole administrator rights. No one could enter without my direct digital approval. My sense of security was entirely destroyed. I refused to leave my sanctuary exposed to another unauthorized gathering. I contacted a top-tier private security firm right after the locksmith left. They dispatched an installation crew that same afternoon. I directed them to wire a comprehensive hardwired surveillance network throughout the entire house. They mounted ultra-high-definition cameras above the front porch, angled lenses across the living room, and positioned wide-view sensors down the main hallway. I tested the feeds on my monitor. Every single entry point and common area was now under strict, unrelenting digital watch. I dismissed the technicians and handled the most sensitive area entirely by myself. I walked into my master walk-in closet and shut the heavy wooden door. I unboxed a specialized microcamera I had purchased on the drive home from the airport. It was cleverly disguised as a standard USB wall charger. I plugged it directly into the outlet at floor level. I adjusted the tiny lens until it pointed straight at my personal steel floor safe. That safe was the absolute fortress of my independence. It held the original title deed to this house, my crucial financial certificates, and my most prized asset, a breathtaking black diamond necklace my parents had generously gifted me for my birthday last month. I set up the hidden lens strictly as a general preventative measure against outside intruders. I wanted a fail-safe in case Teresa ever managed to breach the perimeter and tried to snoop through my valuables. It never once crossed my mind that I would need to protect those exact assets from the man sleeping in my bed. I just wanted absolute, undeniable control over my own property. Evening fell. I sat at the kitchen island watching the live camera feeds on my tablet. At exactly 6:30, Harrison's sedan pulled into the driveway. The porch camera caught him walking up the steps. He jammed his key into the new lock cylinder. It did not fit. He tried forcing it. The camera microphone picked up his frustrated swearing. He rattled the handle violently. Then he started pounding his fist against the reinforced wood. I let him knock for a full minute before I calmly walked over to the console and pressed the unlock button. Harrison threw the door open. His face was flushed crimson with rage. He kicked his shoes off and demanded to know what the hell I had done to the door. I stood my ground, crossed my arms, and told him the locks were permanently changed. I stated that the new access codes belonged exclusively to me. He completely lost his temper. He shouted that I was punishing his mother over a harmless visit with her friends. He accused me of treating his family like common criminals. He stepped closer, raising his voice, demanding I give him the master code immediately because this was his house too. I did not flinch. I turned around, walked to the counter, and grabbed a copy of the property deed. I slammed the document down right in front of him. I tapped my finger hard on the ink where only my name was printed. I looked him dead in the eye and laid down an absolute non-negotiable set of rules. I stated that nobody under any circumstances enters this property without my explicit prior consent. I promised him that if he ever leaked a passcode, or if his mother set one foot inside my house again, I would bypass him entirely and file trespassing charges with the police. Harrison stared at the legal paper. His jaw clenched tight, but he had zero leverage left. He grabbed his bag and stormed down the hall, slamming the heavy guest bedroom door behind him. A month passed, bringing us to the morning of my in-laws' 35th wedding anniversary. I woke up early to prepare my outfit for the grand evening gala. I wanted my appearance to be flawless. I walked into my walk-in closet and knelt in front of the heavy steel floor safe. I punched in my private passcode. The electronic lock chirped, and the heavy metal door swung open. I reached inside to grab the premium velvet box containing my parents' birthday gift. I popped the lid open, expecting the familiar sparkle of the black diamond. My breath hitched. The box was completely empty. The custom-molded interior held absolutely nothing. A sudden wave of nausea hit my stomach. I stared at the void, my mind frantically trying to process the impossible. Nobody had the code. Nobody else possessed administrator access to this vault. I did not panic. I did not scream or tear the closet apart. I calmly closed the empty velvet box and pulled my smartphone from my pocket. My fingers were shaking slightly as I launched the hidden security application. I selected the camera feed perfectly disguised inside the USB charger on the wall. I filtered the timeline, searching for any detected motion near the safe. The application immediately flagged a specific recording from exactly 1 day ago. I hit play. The high-definition footage loaded instantly. The screen showed the closet door opening quietly. Harrison stepped into the frame. He looked nervously over his shoulder, checking the hallway before shutting the door behind him. My blood ran completely cold. I watched my own husband drop to his knees in front of my personal safe. He did not guess the code. He typed it in with practiced speed. He must have stood behind me and memorized my keystrokes weeks ago. The video continued playing mercilessly. Harrison pulled the heavy door open and reached straight for the velvet box. He flipped the lid, took out my black diamond necklace, and stared at it for a brief second. He then shoved the priceless piece of jewelry deep into his jacket pocket. He closed the safe, stood up, and walked out of the closet as if nothing happened. I sat on the floor, staring at the frozen frame of his retreating back. I felt completely paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of his betrayal. I had wired this entire house and planted that specific hidden lens to protect my assets from Teresa. I wanted to catch a greedy mother-in-law attempting a break-in. I never in a million years expected to catch the man sharing my bed. He stole from his own wife, and I knew exactly why he did it. The anniversary party was tonight. Harrison needed to play the role of the ultra-successful son. He needed a magnificent, jaw-dropping gift to present to his mother in front of all their wealthy relatives. He decided to fund his pathetic ego trip using my property. The rage bubbling inside my chest quickly solidified into absolute ice. If I confronted him right now in the hallway, he would deny it. He would manipulate the situation, play the victim, and likely hide the necklace somewhere I could never find it. I refused to give him that opportunity. I backed out of the security application and opened my contacts. I tapped my father's name. Nicholas answered on the second ring. I kept my voice perfectly level. I told my dad exactly what I had just witnessed on the hidden camera. I did not ask for sympathy. I asked for ammunition. I instructed him to go to his home office, open his filing cabinet, and retrieve the original purchase receipt, along with the official GIA diamond certification. I told him to fold those documents into his suit pocket and bring them to the country club tonight. My dad agreed immediately. He understood the assignment. I ended the call and stood up. I wiped the invisible dust from my knees. I walked over to my vanity, sat down, and began applying my makeup. I would put on my finest dress. I would link my arm through his. I would smile for the cameras and act like the perfect supportive wife. I was going to let him dig his own grave on the biggest stage possible. The grand ballroom at the Tampa Country Club was filled with over 100 guests. Waiters navigated the floor, balancing trays of champagne. Douglas stood near the grand archway, firmly shaking hands with every arriving relative and business partner. He stood straight, projecting absolute authority. He demanded respect and heavily guarded his family's reputation. Tonight was his ultimate victory lap. He wanted the entire community to witness his successful 35-year marriage. I walked through the entrance with my hand resting lightly on Harrison's arm. I played the role of the supportive wife with flawless execution. I smiled politely. I nodded at the right moments. I greeted Douglas and offered my formal congratulations. He gave a stern nod of approval. Harrison completely bought into his own delusion. He strutted across the ballroom floor like a conquering hero. He clapped his cousins on the shoulder. He laughed loudly at bad jokes. He ordered top-shelf drinks at the bar, acting as if he owned the entire country club. He basked in the attention of his extended family. He carried my stolen property directly inside his tailored jacket pocket. I sat at our reserved table and watched his performance. The sheer audacity of his confidence only solidified my resolve. My dad Nicholas sat 2 seats away from me. He took a sip of his water and gave me one single, barely noticeable nod. He had the certified documents secured in his pocket. The trap was fully set. The dinner service ended. The heavy clinking of silverware faded into silence as the event coordinator tapped the microphone. Douglas spoke first. He delivered a short, rigid speech about loyalty and family structure. The guests applauded. Then Harrison confidently climbed the stairs to the stage. He adjusted his microphone stand. He gripped the wooden edges of the podium and looked out over the massive crowd. He demanded total silence without saying a word. He began speaking about sacrifice. He praised Teresa for her relentless dedication. "Nobody works harder for this family than my mother," Harrison declared through the speakers. "She always puts everyone else first. She never asks for anything in return. Tonight, I want to finally give something back." The crowd murmured in collective awe. Some of the older aunts wiped tears from their cheeks. I sat completely motionless. I did not break eye contact with him. I wanted to remember this exact moment of his betrayal. I listened to the man who cracked my personal safe spin a web of lies to his entire bloodline. Harrison paused. He reached inside his jacket. He pulled out the premium velvet box. He held it high in the air. The bright stage lights illuminated the dark fabric. "Mom, please come up here," Harrison announced. Teresa dramatically stood up from her chair. She gasped loudly, covering her mouth with both hands. She played the shocked, humble mother to perfection. She hurried up the steps and stood beside him at the center of the stage. Harrison slowly opened the lid. The spotlight instantly hit the massive black diamond. A loud, unified gasp echoed across the vast ballroom. It was a heavy, flawless stone, and it commanded immediate attention. Harrison looked deeply into his mother's eyes. He turned his head toward the microphone and delivered his rehearsed line with sickening sincerity. "I have prepared this special gift for many months for the most wonderful mother," he stated clearly. The ballroom erupted. Over 100 people clapped and cheered for his supposed generosity. Harrison removed the necklace from its custom velvet mold. He handed the empty box to the coordinator. He stepped directly behind Teresa. He reached around her neck, unclasped the chain, and carefully secured my black diamond against her skin. Teresa turned around to face the audience. She placed her hand over the stone. She radiated pure, unfiltered arrogance. She smiled brightly as the hired photographer flashed his camera. Then her eyes dropped from the back of the room and scanned the front tables. She locked her gaze directly onto mine. She did not blink. She tilted her chin up slightly. Her smile slowly twisted into a sharp, provoking smirk. She wore my stolen property on her chest, completely convinced she had finally established dominance. She stood on that stage believing she was entirely untouchable. The applause continued to echo off the high ceilings as the guests celebrated the monumental lie. Before the applause could fade, my dad pushed his chair back and stood up. Nicholas did not rush. He walked with heavy, deliberate steps toward the front of the ballroom. The joyful clapping slowly died down, replaced by a tense silence. Confusion rippled through the front tables. Harrison kept his manufactured smile, but his eyes darted nervously toward my father. Nicholas bypassed the stairs and stepped right up to the side of the stage. He did not look at Teresa. He stared directly at Harrison. He reached inside his tailored suit jacket and pulled out 2 folded pieces of paper. He raised them high in the air for the entire room to see. The silence in the banquet hall became absolute. My dad stepped up to the podium and firmly moved Harrison aside. He leaned into the microphone. His voice boomed across the vast space, sharp and unyielding. "That is a truly beautiful speech, Harrison," Nicholas announced. "It takes a lot of dedication to save $15,000. However, I find your story incredibly fascinating. I find it fascinating because I personally walked into the jeweler 6 weeks ago and purchased that exact black diamond." Harrison turned completely pale. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Nicholas unfolded the papers slowly. "I hold the original receipt and the GIA authenticity certificate right here. Both documents clearly display my legal name and my credit card information." The crowd erupted into loud murmurs. I did not give them a single second to recover. I stood up from my table and walked straight to the audio-visual control desk in the corner. I bypassed the panicked DJ and plugged my smartphone directly into the main projector cable. I tapped my screen once. The massive 200-inch projector screen behind the stage flickered to life. I did not need to explain anything. The visual evidence spoke for itself. The reaction from the audience was instantaneous and explosive. Forks clattered loudly against porcelain plates. Over 100 guests gasped in unison. The room descended into a frenzy of frantic whispering and aggressive pointing. Relatives covered their mouths in pure shock. Disgusted glares shifted rapidly from the glowing screen directly onto Harrison and Teresa. The illusion of the perfect sun shattered into a million irreversible pieces. Teresa froze in sheer terror. She clutched the stolen jewelry around her neck as if it could somehow protect her from the backlash. But the final blow did not come from me. It came from Douglas. My father-in-law had built his entire life on rigid principles and strict family honor. He watched the screen processing the ultimate betrayal, and then he looked at his wife and son. The veins in his neck bulged prominently. His face turned a dangerous dark shade of crimson. Douglas marched toward the stage with terrifying speed. The surrounding guests quickly scrambled out of his way. He stomped up the stairs and ripped the microphone straight out of the stand. The feedback screeched loudly through the massive speakers, making people flinch. Douglas unleashed a level of fury I had never witnessed before. He pointed a shaking finger right at Harrison's chest. "You absolute disgrace!" Douglas roared. His deep voice echoed violently off the walls. "You stand here in front of our entire family and you lie to my face. You steal from your own wife to feed your pathetic ego." Harrison took a massive step back, trembling visibly under his father's intense glare. Douglas pivoted aggressively toward Teresa. He looked at her with pure, unfiltered disgust. "And you? You proudly wear stolen property at my anniversary dinner. You humiliate our name for a piece of jewelry." Teresa started sobbing hysterically, begging him to lower his voice. Douglas flatly refused. He demanded she take the necklace off her neck that exact second. He yelled at her to unhook the clasp immediately before he ripped it off himself. Teresa's hands shook violently as she fumbled with the intricate lock. She finally pulled the diamond off and dropped it onto the wooden podium like a piece of burning coal. The public humiliation was absolute devastating and entirely deserved. That same night, the drive back to our house was suffocatingly quiet. Harrison stared blankly out the passenger window. He did not dare speak a single word. I pulled into the driveway and put the vehicle in park. A familiar sedan immediately pulled up right behind us. Teresa stepped out of her car. Her face was streaked with ruined makeup and fake tears. She rushed up the concrete walkway before I could even unlock the front door. She reached out and grabbed my forearm. She started sobbing hysterically, begging for forgiveness, and claiming she just got carried away by the excitement of the anniversary. She babbled about family unity and making simple mistakes. I yanked my arm aggressively out of her grip. I looked at her with absolute unfiltered disgust. I told her the pathetic performance was officially over. I pointed my finger straight at the edge of the sidewalk. I laid down my absolute final rule. I told Teresa she was permanently banned from this property. I promised her that if she ever stepped 1 foot onto my lawn again, I would bypass family discussions and immediately call the police to press criminal trespassing charges. She opened her mouth to argue, but I stepped inside and slammed the heavy front door right in her face. The deadbolt clicked loudly, locking her out of my life forever. I turned around and walked straight into the kitchen. Harrison trailed behind me like a beaten dog. He started stammering out a pathetic apology. He tried to blame the pressure of the party and his desperate need to impress his wealthy relatives. He swore he intended to put the necklace back eventually. I held up my hand and cut him off instantly. I did not want to hear another fabricated excuse. I reached into my leather briefcase. I pulled out a thick stack of legal documents my attorney had drafted days ago. I slammed the heavy manila folder onto the kitchen island with a loud crack. I ordered him to sit down and read the bold print on the front page. It was a legally binding post-nuptial agreement. Harrison looked at the paper and then looked up at me with wide, terrified eyes. I told him his status in this marriage had fundamentally changed. I laid out the strict non-negotiable terms of his continued residency. First, he had to sign away any and all future claims to this house. The property belonged entirely to me, and he immediately forfeited all marital equity rights. Second, his family lost all access privileges permanently. I revoked every single digital door code and physical key associated with his relatives. He could never invite his mother or anyone else inside without my explicit written consent. He was essentially a tenant living under my strict rules. He read through the clauses, his hands shaking slightly. He realized I had systematically stripped away every ounce of leverage he thought he possessed. He hesitated, holding the pen above the signature line. I leaned across the marble counter and delivered the final blow. I reminded him that I still held the raw security footage of him cracking my safe. I told him this post-nuptial agreement was his one and only lifeline. If he ever secretly helped his mother, if he ever leaked a passcode, or if he violated a single term of this contract, I would not just file for divorce. I would take the unedited video straight to the police station. I would press formal charges for grand larceny. A felony conviction would destroy his career and his precious reputation permanently. I promised him I would gladly watch him wear a prison uniform for stealing from his own wife. He swallowed hard, lowered his head, and signed his name on every single dotted line. Boundaries are not merely suggestions in a marriage, they are the absolute foundation of respect. When someone uses the concept of family to justify theft and manipulation, you do not compromise. You build an impenetrable fortress and lock them out completely. I reclaimed my peace and established my absolute authority. Do you think the post-nuptial agreement was enough, or should I have divorced him right then? Let me know in the comments.